Welcome to Fact Fiction. You are about to be presented with 4 well-known or obscure urban legends, folklore or conspiracy theories, as well as one tall tale submitted by a subscriber. Your task is to simply decide whether the stories are fact, fiction, or inconclusive. So let's begin, shall we? Adultery amidst chaos. It is without question that the September the 11th attack was no laughing matter. But after the tragedy, we begin to hear the many stories of survivors, those who are lucky to have missed their bus, woke up late, called in sick, and even humorous stories of those who were otherwise preoccupied. In June 2002, divorce proceedings began between James Morgan and his then wife Abigail Fraser. This case would come to be known officially as the first divorce directly related to 9/11, with the reason for separation listed as adultery. James Morgan worked for the financial services company Cantor Fitzgerald, whose offices were situated on the 101st floor through to the 105th floor of the North Tower. This meant that James's office on the 103rd floor was situated just 4 floors above where Flight 11 collided with the tower. Abigail, who was watching the chaos unfold live on television, began frantically calling James to see if he was alive and safe, and it wasn't until 11 a.m, half an hour after the North Tower fell, that James finally and very calmly answered his cell phone. Abigail was relieved to hear James's voice, asking him, "Are you okay? Where are you?" To which a rather confused James responded that of course he was okay, and he was in his office. It was later revealed that James was completely unaware that not only his office, but the entire building was now rubble, as he had chosen that morning to visit his mistress and was otherwise engaged during the attack.
Lemon juice face mask. In January of 1995, a man walked into a Pennsylvania branch of the Mellon Bank. He was wearing a blue parka, carrying a semi-automatic handgun, and was intent on making a large withdrawal. After forcing one of the bank's employees at gunpoint to hand over a large quantity of cash, the man in the blue parka fled from the scene, closely followed by a second unidentified male, who police discovered upon reviewing CCTV evidence had already been standing in one of the queues in the bank, apparently awaiting the arrival of his accomplice in the blue parka before assisting with the heist. A manhunt began immediately, and it took investigators only 6 days to identify and arrest the suspect in the blue parka. But despite having clear surveillance footage of the second suspect, he continued to evade capture, almost as if he had vanished into thin air. 4 months passed, and in a bid to identify and apprehend the second suspect, Pittsburgh police submitted images from the bank surveillance footage to the 11 o'clock news to run on their Crime Stoppers segment of the program, and it was later reported that less than an hour after the segment was broadcast, the second suspect had been identified and arrested, and would finally face punishment for his crimes. Upon his arrest, the second suspect, however, was surprised that officers had found him, and completely dumbfounded how they had achieved it, remarking to detectives, "But I wore the lemon juice. I wore the lemon juice." It was later revealed that the suspect had been informed that if he smeared lemon juice all over his face, he would become invisible to surveillance cameras, much in the same way that lemon juice is often used as a homemade substitute for invisible ink.
Bristol Zoo parking attendant. Over its total 12 acres of land, Bristol Zoo provides homes for over 7,000 animals from over 400 species. As you can imagine, this attracts a lot of visitors, with the most recent annual figures at around 400 to 500,000 people per year, totaling over 1,000 people per day. To help fund the maintenance and day-to-day running of the site, Bristol Zoo has numerous sources of income, one of which is the car park on site, where visitors can pay £4.50 for a day's parking or a reduced rate if they're members of the zoo. For 25 years, the responsibility of collecting the parking fees fell on one man. He became popular with regular visitors and was known for his helpful, friendly nature and overall dedication to his job, having never taken a day off work and braving all weather conditions to ensure the car park ran as smooth as possible. However, one day, he didn't show up. Staff initially noticed as they arrived for work, and as regular and non-regular visitors began arriving, they too noted that there was no parking attendant and were naturally confused as to how and where they should pay their parking fee. Concerns were ultimately raised by staff to upper management, who were worried about their colleague, and the zoo's management contacted Bristol City Council, as it was revealed that the car park, whilst used by zoo visitors, actually fell under the responsibility of the council. But this news fell on confused ears, as the car park did not fall under their responsibility, and at no point had they placed a parking attendant there. As it transpired, no one at the zoo had ever known the man's name, had never really seen him anywhere other than the car park, and he was neither employed by the zoo or Bristol City Council. It was believed that the man, whose con had lasted a quarter of a century, had potentially walked away with hundreds upon thousands of pounds, and to this day, his identity and whereabouts remain a mystery.
The Princess Towers. Kingston, Ontario, is one of Canada's most historic cities, but sticking out amongst the cathedrals and limestone mansions of its downtown is an eyesore. Princess Towers was built in 1972 as a commune for the nearby Queen's University, but this project was considered a failure when students had trashed the towers in its early years. The apartment complex, which is loathed by the locals now, accommodates only the most desperate university students, or those unfortunate residents who struggle to find lodging elsewhere. But the building's fate was somewhat decided from its early conception, when Queen's University approached and subsequently hired a somewhat eccentric Soviet architect, whose previous work had been known to turn heads, and the university felt that his quirky approach to design would be fitting for the overall vision of a modern university. One of the more interesting design features of Princess Towers is that there is no 5th or 10th floor service on the elevators, and instead, these floors are only accessible by stairs. Whether this is an oversight or some form of superstition on the part of the architect is unknown. However, this could also be due to the fact that construction workers were often unable to make sense of the acrylic scribbles covering the blueprints, and it wasn't until they were halfway through the construction that it was revealed that some of the plans were in fact upside down and had been thrown together by the architect in just 12 hours. Representatives from the head of Queen's University attempted to contact the architect for assistance and some form of explanation, as the financial impact of the mistakes were becoming vast. However, it would seem that the eccentric architect had already taken his money and long since skipped out of the city, leaving the university without any idea of what to do other than keep going on the same path and hope that the construction teams could somehow make good of a bad situation. Construction was eventually completed many months overdue and way over budget, and rather than the quirky modern student accommodation that they had hoped for, Queen's University had inadvertently given rise to Kingston's only upside-down building.
Drink driving on the information superhighway. In 1994, a worrying misunderstanding led to a Senate bill that threatened to radically change the way the internet was policed in America. In an article featured in PC Computing magazine by regular contributor John Dvorak, the details of Senate Bill 040194 were outlined. In summary, Bill 040194 intended to both ban any person from using the internet whilst intoxicated and also ban the discussion of any sexual matter online, with the intention to make both actions felony offences, respectively. The confusion arose from the common nickname given to the internet in the 1990s, the information superhighway. Senator Leahy, who proposed the bill, believed that as the internet was commonly referred to as a highway, similar laws to that of a physical highway or road should apply. And as a result, using the internet or any public network whilst intoxicated should thus bear the same sentence as being intoxicated whilst operating a vehicle. The bill, despite its absurdity, had widespread support from both other Senate members and the general American public, many of whom still didn't quite understand the new technology in its early days. As a result, huge concerns began to spread among internet users regarding how such laws would be policed, and as explained by Dvorak, should Bill 040194 have passed, it would have been given a free pass for FBI and local police monitoring, leading to a major erosion of both internet and public network users' privacy. Much to the relief of early internet users, despite seemingly huge support, when time came for the Senate to vote on Bill 040194, it was completely dismissed. This story began circulating online in June 2002 in the form of an image made to look like a newspaper clipping, and in various other forms of print media, often with slightly varied details but ultimately the same punchline. But the story, however, is nothing more than an urban legend. For many Americans, and in fact people all over the world who lost loved ones during the attack, the pain of 9/11 still lives with them to this day. And it's commonly believed that these light-hearted jokes and stories, such as the story of the 9/11 divorce, were circulated as a way to bring just a small dose of humour back to an otherwise torn and mourning country. A similar joke was also circulated shortly after Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 disappeared in 2014, wherein a man decides to spend some time with his mistress and so tells his wife that he is travelling on Flight 370 to Beijing for a business trip. The punchline is he is ultimately left stranded at his mistress's house, with no idea how to return home, as he is now presumed dead by his family and friends.
As absurd as it may seem, this story, which took place on the 6th of January in 1995 in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, is 100% true. The two men were formally named as 42-year-old Clifton Earl Johnson and 45-year-old MacArthur Wheeler. Wheeler had entered the bank prior to Johnson's arrival, and together they not only robbed the Swissvale branch of the Mellon Bank, but were also wanted as suspects in connection to a second heist that had taken place that same day at the Fidelity Savings Bank nearby in Brighton Heights. According to a March 1996 article titled Trial and Error by Michael A. Fuoco for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, it was revealed that someone had convinced Wheeler that smearing lemon juice on his face would render him completely invisible to surveillance equipment, and he had confirmed this theory to be true by testing it out at home with a Polaroid camera. Fuoco spoke to former Commander Ronald Freeman and former Sergeant Wally Long, both of the Pittsburgh Police, who had dealt with Wheeler's case at the time, who explained that Wheeler had stated that the lemon juice was burning his face and eyes, and the most likely theory, based on the fact that Wheeler's vision was greatly reduced due to the lemon juice, was that he had aimed the camera in the wrong direction, ultimately not capturing himself in the photo, and as such assumed that the lemon juice had worked its magic. Much like Clifton Earl Johnson, MacArthur Wheeler was convicted for his involvement in the Swissvale Mellon Bank robbery. However, he avoided further conviction for the Brighton Heights Fidelity Savings Bank robbery after charges against him were dropped.
This story began circulating online via email around the middle of 2007. The email claims it is a true story taken from an article in the London Times. However, it is entirely fictional. Not only does Bristol Zoo own and manage both of their visitor car parks, representatives for the zoo have also stated numerous times when asked about the urban legend that the story is a complete hoax, and at no point has there ever been confusion regarding ownership of their car parks. Research by Bristol's own Evening Post newspaper suggests the article may have begun life as an April Fool's joke, and even stated that a version of the story was published in the Evening Post in April 2007 as part of an article about urban myths.
While Princess Towers is a real apartment block in Kingston, Ontario, they were neither designed by a Soviet architect nor built upside down. And instead, this tall tale was submitted by Joseph Kafala of the YouTube channel Anomaly Documentaries. You can find their channel linked in the description below.
Whilst John Dvorak is a real columnist who had previously written for PC Computing magazine, this article was in fact an April Fool's joke of Dvorak's invention. And in fact 2 clues were hidden in the article as a giveaway that Bill 040194 was an April Fool's joke. The first being the name of the bill itself, 040194, which was in fact the date, 04/01/1994, or April the 1st, 1994, the day the article was published. He also finished the article with a more blatant reveal where he states, "You can register your protests with your congressperson or Ms. Lerpa Sloof in the Senate Legislative Analyst's Office. Her name spelled backwards says it all." When reading Miss Lerpa Sloof's first name and surname backwards, it does in fact reveal April Fools. Dvorak prides himself on creating over 30 years worth of convincing April Fool's jokes, and this one was no exception. The article enraged readers so much in fact that the very real Senator Edward Kennedy, whom Dvorak mentions in the article as a keen supporter of the bill, was faced with no choice but to issue a formal denial stating that he did not support the fictional bill 040194. Ironically, despite his years of experience and the convincing nature of his April Fool's pranks and the trouble that they may cause, Dvorak was critical of Elon Musk in 2018 for his famous "Tesla goes bankrupt" April Fool's tweets, stating in his April 4th, 2018 article for PC Magazine, Since April 1st is not recognised by any government authority, I believe a corporation should be fined by regulatory agencies for false statements. If the stock price dips and you are day trading, you may have been defrauded. Bring action against one of these corporations and they will all suddenly realise that they are not comedians. Start with Tesla. So how did you do? Did you spot the fake parking attendant? Or perhaps you were caught out despite wearing the juice? Post your score out of 5 in the comments below, and make sure to keep your eyes peeled for the next episode of Fact Fiction. I'd like to say thank you to Jim Pagel, aka NightDocs, for appearing in this episode. NightDocs is a channel for those interested in the strange and macabre elements of the internet and society, and I especially recommend you check out the incredibly in-depth and expertly produced documentary, The Mystery of the Washed Up Feet. You can find the NightDocs channel linked in the description below. And make sure you check out Joseph Safala of Anomaly Documentaries, who contributed the topsy-turvy tale of the Princess Towers. Anomaly Documentaries produce content covering some of the more strange and eccentric characters, locations and events in recent history. And if you thought their tale of the Princess Towers was crazy, then check out their video on the very real and very dangerous La Velle di Scampia in Italy. You can find Anomaly Documentaries also linked in the description below. And if you would like to submit your own tall tale for a future episode of Fact Fiction, you can do so at the official Things That Go Bump website.